This is a presentation of the Sports Source Digital Network, presented by Hearthside Bank.
Welcome into the Sports Source Digital Network. John Pennington joined by from The Athletic, David Ubben right here from 99.1 The Sports Animal, and soon the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame right here. John Wilkerson, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Right there, Will West, also 99.1 The Sports Animal. Appreciate all you guys being here. We've been talking about talent on the channel the last week or two, and I want to do that again today. I want to talk about NFL talent. Tennessee ranks right kind of in the middle of the SEC. Over the last 4 years, since Josh Heupel's been here, they've had 17 players drafted into the NFL. That ties them with Florida, Oklahoma, and South Carolina. Ole Miss has 21. LSU, now you're getting up there to the teams that have won national titles, been in Atlanta. LSU 29, Texas 33, so double what Tennessee's produced. Alabama 34, Georgia 46, 13 players drafted last year. And then you got some, the ne'er-do-wells are beneath you. Auburn and A&M with 14, but Kentucky 13, Missouri 12, Arkansas 9, Mississippi State 7, Vandy 1. My question, 37 wins over the last 4 years, a playoff bid, an Orange Bowl, a Citrus Bowl. You've done well. You've outperformed. If you're middle of the pack in terms of NFL talent, you've outperformed it. Question is, if the goal is to be running with Georgia, Alabama, Texas, and LSU, really the first three, but LSU gets to Atlanta on occasion. If your goal is to be running with those guys, how much do you need to jump up your pro talent pipeline? David Ubben.
I think quite a bit, but you can't really do that. I mean, it's sort of a chicken and egg situation where you can't really do that unless you're recruiting. And Tennessee is kind of back in this place now where they don't really have an edge necessarily. It's a money business. Tennessee jumped in the pool very, very early. Was very aggressive. That's paid off for them. Mm-hmm. But now you're in the rev share era. There's a lot of money. A lot of people are pooling some of that money from donors into the rev share pot. So what you can do on top of that, as we sort of figure out, as we maybe sniff back in the Bagman era a little bit, figure out what it takes to go over that rev share. Tennessee, there's not really an advantage for them again. They're sort of back on equal footing, and they have to figure that out. And so I don't think you can have those kind of draft numbers without the recruiting numbers. I mean, LSU, you throw a rock, you hit a five-star defensive tackle. Texas is Texas. Alabama and Georgia, Alabama still got the Saban effect and all those things. So I don't think one can come without the other. But the road to that, I don't know that I see it for Tennessee because you've got to find an advantage. And they had one for like 3 years, but everybody's kind of caught up now, and the rules have caught up as well.
Your recruiting consistently stays between 10 and 15.
Yeah.
That's where you are. But in terms of the SEC, it stays around 5th or 6th.
That's just part of the SEC, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, to get up there with those guys, you're going to have to jump it. But as you say, you almost need to have the NFL guy. The reason Georgia and Alabama and Texas recruit so well is because they're pro factories. The reason they're pro factories is because they recruit so well. So, yes, which one comes first if you're Tennessee? Now, again, you can make the case that Josh Heupel and his system allow you to overperform. As much as we cried and grumbled and griped about that offense last year, it was still top 15 in the nation in points, top 15 in the nation in yardage. It was good enough to get you to playoff, though the defense and one running back did the heavy lifting. Still, you overperform. That offense is an equalizer. It's like the wishbone in a lot of ways. It makes up for deficiencies. But if you're going to win championships, is it good enough to do that without having top-of-the-line NFL players in it? Will West.
Yeah, look, I think that you have enough talent now that where guys can be top-of-the-line NFL players. You've recruited well, though. David Sanders is good enough. Lance Hurd is good enough. The guys you had before weren't, and you got them drafted. Hendonhooker wasn't going to the NFL at Virginia Tech. He wasn't going to start at Virginia Tech. Jalen Hyatt cannot play in the NFL because he's not good enough. Point blank. If he'd gone to South Carolina, he never gets drafted or wins the Millennium or done any of those things. No one expected James Pierce. If Omar Norman-Lott stays at Arizona State, where's he getting drafted? I think Tennessee has overachieved with the talent they have. Remember, 3 years ago, you played Solon Page because you didn't have bodies at linebacker. Now you actually can finally choose the guys. So you need to get this group of young guys into the NFL, and they need to succeed because the guys you just put in the NFL probably aren't good enough. Otherwise, then I think the book on you, or at least if I was recruiting against Tennessee, I would say, look at all those guys they put in the NFL. None of them can play. They're not going to develop you well enough. But if you can get this group of young guys in the NFL and they can succeed, I do think that you'll be okay and you'll be able to create kind of an NFL pipeline.
John Wilkerson.
I do think that it is important for Tennessee to produce receivers that in turn produce in the National Football League if they want to continue getting the top talent at that position in Knoxville. Now, Cedric Tillman, there was a stretch this past year where he had like 3 or 4 career improving record games, one after another. Then he had a concussion, and that kind of wiped him out for the rest of the year. So he hit his stride for a brief shining moment. Will is spot on about Jalen Hyatt, and it hadn't happened for what was the only Tennessee Volunteer to ever win the Biletnikoff Award. But you also start to see, you take a look at what Tennessee did last year with Dylan Sampson, the year he had, which arguably the best ever for a Tennessee running back. You're starting to see an uptick in terms of the highly regarded running backs put Tennessee on their visit list at least. They're exploring it because they're seeing that Josh Heupel's offense runs the football an awful lot.
You're battling with Michigan right now for one of the top running back prospects in the country.
Exactly. So I do think that when you've seen the uptick in what we've seen with Tennessee, it's helping, because what they are doing, especially with those that they've signed recently and those that they have committed for this next year, really strong on the defensive side. And I think all of that helps with what the pro profile will be, because take a look at the top of that list. How many of those guys are on the other side of the ball? Josh Heupel, known for offense, I think Tennessee is going to start producing some defensive contributors when it comes to the NFL. But I think that it's on the way. I think it's happening. And then you take a look. 2 guys that I would point out with the Los Angeles Rams, and that would be Byron Young. He's been a really good performer for them. And then the guy that had the year nobody saw coming, Jalen McCullough, undrafted free agent. He was ready for the NFL. He put in an awfully good year, and I can't wait to see how it goes for him this season.
I love the fact that you're always positive. It helps to balance me out. But no, I do look at it though, and it's funny. I don't know that Tennessee can ever get back to, and it's tough. It's the SEC, and you've added since then. You've added 4 more teams to this league, but I don't know that you can ever get back to where Philip Fulmer had it in terms of recruiting when you were top 5 year after year after year for the most part. And I'm afraid that's what you need to be. Even with Josh Heupel's system, even with the Heupel system, which raises your floor and can outperform some of your talent, I don't know that you can get back to that top 5 level in the nation. And if you don't get there, I don't see how you're competing for titles in the SEC. Now, you made it to the playoff last year. If they're seeding that thing in the way they're seeding it moving forward, probably, you would have had a home game against SMU. You're probably in the second round. That's a totally different outlook than going and getting poleaxed at Ohio State. So I do think there's a possibility to win big, but if the idea is you want to win an SEC title, to get up there with the Georgias and Alabamas and Texas, you've got to start cranking out better guys, and that means you've got to start recruiting better. And I don't know that these guys can recruit to that level. Again, there's only 3 or 4 coaching staffs in the country who do recruit to that level. So I'm not putting them down there as the worst in the world. Nothing wrong with 10th to 15th. That's pretty darn good. But if you want to be 1 or 2 in the SEC, you got to be better than 5th or 6th in recruiting in the SEC.
Let me show you the path for this. You always talk to guys that play in the 90s, and you hear the stories about the peak Fulmer practices. You're like, it was war and it was crazy. Sounds a lot like Georgia in 2024, 2025.
Yep.
College football is changing. And I think a big reason why those Georgia and Alabama numbers peaked the way that they did is because you could stockpile all this talent, and that is incredibly difficult now, especially in the rev share, especially in the money era. You just financially can't make that work. There's only so many 5-stars. You can't get 6 5-star linemen in a single class. Now, some of those programs, the Texas A&Ms, have had trouble keeping big-time talent, but if you can get some of that, because it's going to be more evenly distributed, I think we're in the data, we're still seeing some of the old way of how college football used to be, where you could still sort of stockpile talent even in the transfer era. Now with rev share, with transfer, it's you don't have those 5-star guys like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to sit 2 years, I'm going to go. If you can get some of those guys, because it's a volume situation. John, you ripped off a bunch of these players, but they're sort of here, there, and some of the guys, they're here, there. You need a bunch of those guys. And I think you can still have more of a volume if you recruit at your peak level and get some of those guys that just I'm not going to go to Georgia and sit, and get some of those guys that are big-time talents. You have to play them earlier. And if there's a road to the title, it's that. And being able to cut into the lack of ability to stockpile, but you have to be right there where, okay, I don't want to go sit at Georgia and Alabama. I don't know if I can play early, but you're my next pick. And you're right there. We saw that in the Big 12. the issue used to be like, well, I'm not good enough to go to Texas and Oklahoma, but who's next? And Mizzou filled that role for a little bit and had some really good years.
Mike
Oklahoma
Gundy,
State
run with that. Yeah.
Baylor had some good years for doing that, and you have
With
to
this
be
system.
Yes, with this system, you have to be like the next pick for the elite guys, and if you can do that, then in the playoff era, you get a peak year, you get the next Hendonhooker, whoever that is, maybe Jake Merklinger is the next great Tennessee quarterback. If you have a great quarterback that raises your floor and your talent's there, the peak year is not impossible.
Well, don't we need? I'm not ready to cut. Nothing's a referendum yet on what Josh Heupel can do or will do. One, the system's going to change. We're going into a new system starting July 1st, and it will probably change again, I believe, before July 1st of next year.
We don't know what the system's going to be.
So it can be anything. Also, I want to see what they can do when they're finally in the blue chip ratio. I think sometimes we don't pay enough credit to how little talent they had on that roster compared to some other schools, and they were able to get to a playoff.
Yes.
So let's see, once they're in the blue chip ratio in a year, this year, next year, I want to see what they can do with that. And then, because if you can win back to 10 or 11 wins, then I think it becomes easier. And I know no one wants a two-step process, but there can be a two-step process to bringing in a lot of 5-stars and becoming a top 5 program.
There's different ways to go get guys. I mean, there's certainly different ways to go
I
get
think they
guys,
should
but
be
you
more
also have
aggressive in
to
the
keep
portal,
guys.
too.
I agree.
I don't think the aggression has been there. I know that in some ways that's risky, but if you can earmark some of your budget and say, we need 3 or 4 impact guys in the portal. And those guys are fewer and far between now as people have figured out that it's safer to pay the guys that you've got. But there's always a couple. And also, not that anybody tampers, but you can also say, hey, we got $2.5 million here for you. Like, come say hey.
The other interesting thing there is Josh Heupel clearly likes to build a base through recruiting first. And I don't think there's anything wrong with building recruiting first. I wouldn't want to be the Ole Miss situation where you're forced to just live in the portal. Ohio State, you look at that roster they built last year. It was a very expensive roster, but the entire defense had been there for years. So it was not just
they paid guys to
cherry-picked some guys, yes. But when you look at it and the way Heupel has done it, yes, he wants to build through high school. But the conundrum is he doesn't like to play freshmen. So that makes it a little tougher.
Yeah.
If you're going to be the team that relies on young, then you're going to have to start playing young guys more. And this looks like, offensively anyway, this is a year where you're going to be playing younger guys. I don't know how many true freshmen are going to be out there, David Sanders, but in terms of your receiving core, those are sophomores. But he didn't put those guys on the field last year. So if you're going to be that program that lives in we recruit high schoolers first, I think you're either going to have to recruit by saying, we'll get you on the field immediately, or recruit by saying, we get you to the NFL. Those are the two ways to recruit, because you look at these other schools, the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Alabamas, the one thing they got going for them, you had to pay David Sanders through the nose because Ohio State wanted him and you offered more than they did. They get a discount. Georgia gets a discount. Alabama gets a discount. You talk to the recruiting guys, those teams get a discount.
And when you don't pay Mike McCoy or don't play Mike McCoy as a freshman, then you're going to pay him more to keep him a second year, right?
So if you've got guys who aren't on the field, that's a reason to leave. If you're not putting guys into the pros by the thousands, then that means you're not going to get a discount. So you either need to start cranking more guys into the pros, so where people say, I'm going to the factory. I'll take less because I know those guys will get me in the first round. That's what they do with Georgia. That's what they do with Ohio State. Or start playing guys earlier and making sure they're happy and keeping them around.
Maybe. I mean, who is the best transfer that they brought in? The highest, best hype, not production. Is it Keenan Peely?
Joe, by God, Milton.
Yeah, but like, is it Keenan Peely who didn't really? Like, it's probably Keenan Peely, and it's just like I don't know. I mean, the other plan is take the Texas Tech plan and have an alum sell a company for $4 billion. That works pretty well.
Yeah.
So I still think that they're missing that aspect of roster building and like get an impact player or two to come in and oh man, they tried with the offensive line. How much of that is evaluation and we just missed on those two guys? Or I don't know. All I know is it didn't work and those guys did not play very well.
Yeah, and then at the same time, as you talk about who did you lose, is that some way a boomerang effect that comes around to, well, you either didn't identify talent that was going to help you and you said it's time for you to go somewhere else, or they went somewhere else and they weren't going to play. I think it's still a fair question for Tennessee to build more components homegrown in terms of its offensive line than what we've seen. because that's what has been the biggest addition on the offensive side for this year's portal is 2 offensive linemen that you expect to start, and of course the outstanding freshman that everybody wanted on their team. But that to me is perhaps the biggest unanswered question. That and receiver.
Yes, there's really just 2 areas where this staff, everywhere else they have found talent and developed talent and produced talent. But in terms of finding a guy, signing a guy, and developing the guy, offensive line and receiver are the 2 spots where they haven't. And you can say, well, Darnell Wright, they inherited Darnell Wright. Jalen Hyatt, they inherited Jalen Hyatt. They inherited Cedric Tillman. What we haven't seen is guys that they went out, found, and brought in and developed at those 2 positions, which to me is the most fascinating thing in the world, because you would think that a guy with Josh Heupel's offensive background, the numbers he puts up, offensive linemen and wide receivers would be killing to come here, and that would be the spot where he would rack it up. Instead, he's getting quarterbacks like there's no challenge to it.
You left a name out of the inherited list also, Hendonhooker, by about a month.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's interesting that we've been here 4 years and we're
Just
still
one of the great things Jeremy Pruitt left.
that was crazy. We're still waiting on Josh Heupel's been here a while and he has not brought in a quarterback that has reached the heights that we've seen other quarterbacks in the system. And I couldn't really tell you why. They've tried. Joe Milton on paper makes sense. Nico obviously made sense in a lot of ways.
Milton also didn't work at Michigan, so I think
true.
that works in UT's favor.
But you brought him in. You recruited over Hendonhooker.
And
then you gave him the
starting. You had him starting over Hendonhooker too. Yeah, I agree. I also think that I'll defend them on that one, just because I think 99% of coaches look at his arm and say,
probably.
"Oh, I'm the guy to fix it."
I just think it's weird.
Patriots draft him.
It's true. I just think it's weird that this is 4 years, 5 years in, and they haven't really had a quarterback that they went out and got that has flourished.
Yet you've got, that's true, the flourish part of it. Yet you've got another 5-star waiting to come in.
And you're
Nico
paying
was
4
supposed to be the
quarterbacks
guy.
right now on your budget because you're paying Joey Aguilar, Merklinger, McIntyre, and Faison Brandon.
Yeah, McIntyre, high 4-star. Merklinger was a 4-star. Brandon, 5-star.
Yeah.
So they haven't had and Nico was a 5-star. So they haven't had a problem getting him here. But
it's weird.
Nico did not.
Weird.
Nico started 1 year. You didn't. You chose to go with Joe Milton that year, and you made a Citrus Bowl. Okay.
Yeah.
Would you have been better off going with Nico that year and making that a reset, or would you have just been asking for more cash after his second
I don't
year?
know. You would in theory have had better weapons. It's an interesting question. You would have in theory had better weapons coming back on paper. Because we talked about the transfer thing. Like Dante Thornton makes sense on paper, and then you get here and you're like, oh, that's why Oregon didn't pay.
That's
to keep
right.
him. And it's like, oh, this is not working. Like you're not producing. We're not producing. We're not seeing enough of the flashes. Like other than what the slant and run again for 60 yards against whoever that was. So that's like the only big time play we saw from him.
But they weirdly had injuries at both wide receiver and offensive line. And
the Brew injury is big.
number. Well, I mean, but Squirrel was injured last year.
Yeah.
Thornton was injured last year. On the offensive line, you had 3 guys that were constantly injured last year. And I don't know if it's the tempo. I don't know what it necessarily is. But they've just.
But at the
it's
same
happened
time,
so many times to so many guys. I kind of feel like it's not a them problem, right?
at the same time, you compared their injuries and games missed to other SEC teams. They had a lot of nagging injuries, but they weren't just decimated season-ending.
Not like
finished
Oklahoma last year.
Right, exactly, exactly. All right, John Wilkerson, anything that you want to add here? Anything defiantly this?
No, again, I think that it's fair to wonder and ask because Tennessee needs to. If they want to continue to climb the ladder within the Southeastern Conference, they also have to improve the flow from the pipeline to the next level.
Yeah, and I also, here's the thing. A lot of people, and I don't know that anybody's going to be able to see this. I'll try and draw. A lot of people just want to do, when they hear stair step, this is what I think of a stair step. I think that's a stair step.
Yes.
That's a normal stair step.
People want a box jump. They don't want a stair step.
What they want is this. Yeah, stair step. We just jump. And it's like, so the idea that I'm sitting here saying, okay, they've got to get to this. I'm not saying, well, they're not there by January of next year, fire them all.
Yeah.
Some people are.
I know. And
that's the problem.
And that's where I come back to 37 wins is pretty darn good compared to where you were. I'm a big believer of man's got to know his limitations, as Clint Eastwood once said.
That's right.
Programs need to know their limitations as well. I'm a big believer in the goal being championships at Tennessee. I think expectations, for the time being, need to be lower. And I've seen enough in Josh Heupel to say, let's see if he can get to this place. But I do think if this program's ever going to be competing for SEC titles, you got to start getting guys in the NFL because that's going to help you on recruiting and it's also going to help you with the budget. because guys will start giving you the discount. So, David Ubben, Will West, Hall of Famer John Wilkerson right here. Thanks to all of these folks for coming in here. Thanks to you for watching. If you like this kind of conversation, hit the like button. Subscribe to our channel. That helps other Tennessee fans know that we're out there. Also, I want you to ring the bell. That will notify you when we're putting stuff up here on the channel. And, of course, leave a comment. If you agree, disagree with anything we said, did we miss something? Did I say something stupid? That's fine. Jump in there, leave it in the comment. Or if you're my mother or dad, you can leave something nice in the comment. We'll see you next time right here on the Sports Source Digital Network.